Okay, Boker Tov Baruch Hashem. Today's daf yomi is Chullin Samach Vav 66. And we're going to start on daf of 66a. The first quarter of the daf, or the first half of the daf, is going to be dealing with continuation of our discussion of locusts. How do we know that locusts are kosher? And the Gemara said yesterday that we know that locusts are kosher is if they have 4 signs. And in addition to that, they need to be called a locust. Chagav, they need to be called a locust. The 4 signs of a kosher locust are as it has 4 legs, plus 2 jumper legs, plus wings that cover the majority, plus 4 wings, plus wings that cover the majority of its body. In addition, the Gemara says it needs to be called a chagav. The Rashba, writing in 14th century Spain, says, since we no longer know what exactly is a chagav, therefore we can't eat locusts. Unless we have a tradition. If somebody has a tradition that something is called a locust, then we can rely upon that person's tradition and eat it. Yesterday when we were discussing this, somebody told me that there is some kosher locusts that are now on the market. So you can look into that and you can find those kosher locusts. Pretty sure that it's pretty easy to find.
It's really good environmental insects. It's much lower than pollution.
Okay, go for it. Not all locusts, not all insects are kosher, just locusts. Okay, you can look up the kosher locusts and go for it. Or fish. That's the other thing that's discussed on today's daf. So Gemara says, what is, yesterday we had two brisos that were in conflict with each other. The two brisos that were in conflict was that what was called the Tana, the first brisa, which we'll see is called the Tana de Beirav, and the second brisa, which is Tana de Beirishmal. The first brisa listed in addition to the 4 locusts that are mentioned in the Torah, it also lists 4 other types because it's called the klal uprat, the general followed by the specific. And it's just those specific things that are mentioned to add one more thing. Whereas the Tana de Shmuel says a klal prat to klal, that it's a general followed by specific followed general, anything that was similar. So it added on, the second brisa added on other features. So the Gemara says, what's exactly the nature of the dispute between the Tana de Beirav and Tana de Rebbe Shmuel? The Gemara calls the first brisa Tana de Beirav, even though the brisa itself is not called that. So Rashi explains, because that was the standard brisa. That was one everybody knew. But the brisa, the Tana de Beirav, that was only known by his students. So anyway, that's Rashi's opinion. You should just know that Rambam argues with that, about what Tana de Beirav means. Rambam says it actually was the brisa of Rav. So Tana de Beirav, so what's the difference between them? If there would be a locust whose head was elongated, that's where there's a dispute. That according to the Tana de Rav, it's only kosher if it has that it's kosher if it has the 4 simanim listed in the Mishnah, and also the 5th siman that its head is not elongated. Whereas the Tana de Shmuel is on the position that it only needs those 4 simanim of the Mishnah, and it doesn't need the 5th one. Meaning to say, Tana de Shmuel says it doesn't need the idea that its head is not elongated, but the Tana de Rav says it does, because he only adds on those specific ones. Tana de Rav savar asher lo kra'im. It says that it has these 4 legs. Klal arba salam chargo chagav. That's lemineu. That is a prat. So klal prat. When you have a general followed by specific in the klal omash prat, there's only what's in the specific. The minei in, the lav, the minei lo. And only that was exactly like it. Meaning to say, it's only which it has those 4 signs. Plus, it doesn't have an elongated head. And Rabbi the Damile Mishneh Stadin. So in what's included, only that anything that's exactly like it in both sides, meaning to say that it has all 4 signs, plus the fact it doesn't have an elongated head. Whereas Tana de Beirav Savar Shalok Rayim Klal, that's a general. Arbeh Salam Chargo Chagav, that's a prat. The Minei Uchazer Uklal. So that's what's called a klal protocol, general, specific, and in general. And there, in a prat. So we only we add on anything that's similar to it. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. So marbi called the damilah b'chatzad. It has anything that's similar to it on one side, i.e., even if it doesn't have an elongated head, but if it has the other four signs, it's going to be deficient. Gemara says, so we see from here, Rabbi Shmuel learns what's called a klal prat to klal, and therefore he says, even if it doesn't have an elongated head, it's kosher. The Gemara says, but wait 1 second. But the Gemara says, but the first generality of Rabbi Shmuel of the verse is not similar to the last generality. What does that mean? As the Gemara explains, the first generality says Asher lo kirayim. It has the four legs. If it has four legs, you can eat it, otherwise you can't. But the Kol Basra says Adeshavu ba'arba simanim. The last general rule says it only needs the four simanim. So they're not exactly the same. They're two totally different things. They're not the same general principle. So how can you learn from that the principle of klal prat to klal? So the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, and well, actually, the Tanan Meir Shmuel says even though the first general rule is not the same as the last one, he does still apply the rule, the principle of klal prat to klal. Udamrinan nami ba'alma the dayin Tanan Meir Shmuel b'kol prati ki agavna me'ache, and that which we say throughout other places in Shas, that Rabbi Tanan Meir Shmuel also learns this principle of klal prat to klal, where the two general principles are not exactly the same. Well, this is the uber source for it. This is the source for this idea that he doesn't require both klalim to be the same in order to apply this principle of klal prat to klal. Now we analyze the braisos. It says Amar Ishmo Chagav. If its name is a Chagav, then you can apply the fact that it has all four signs and say the locust is kosher. But hold on one second. Harold, I asked my friend your question about the water moccasin, and we'll ask afterwards. We'll play his message. We'll see what he said. Well, he got back to me right away. We'll see what he says. So, I might think, let's say it's called a chagav, even though it doesn't have all these signs. According to its type. It needs all of these types. Meaning to say, if it's called a chagav, if it doesn't have these four signs, it's not kosher. The Gemara says, and you learn it out from the fact that it says limineu. The Gemara says, Ein bo kol asimanim, if it doesn't have these four signs, why would you think it's kosher? Arba v'chargol ktiv. So why would you think that it was kosher? It says arba and chargol, it says in the Bryce, and that's how we learned out that it has to be similar to them. That has all these four signs. The Gemara says, hold on 1 second. The Gemara says, "Iloksiv salam kidekamras." If it didn't say salam, we would have said, like you said, hashadich salam. From the fact that it says salam, rabuye rosha aruch. So from the fact that the word salam is adding on, even if it has an elongated head, that even if it has one sign, it's kosher. I might have thought, as long as there's one sign, it's kosher. It doesn't need all four signs. Kamash one. So now the Gemara says just like a coda to the discussion. Mashna Hasam. Why in one brisa does it say? In the first brisa it says the Amr Salam, that the Salam locust is called a Rashon. The Chargol Zenipol. Umashna Hacha. Why in the second brisa, Tanan Meir Shmuel, does it say the Amr Salam Zenipol? The Chargol Rashon. Why in the second brisa does it say that the Salam is called the Nipol locust, and the chargol is called the Rashon locust? So the Gemara says, Marki Asri. They're talking about the same thing, but they each had a different name for it. So It's just a pure language issue in whichever locale it was. Ubedagim kol sheyeshos napir v'kaskesses. By a fish, we said any fish that has. Oh wait, one more point to make here. That Rashi quotes the Halachos Gedolos, which is a Gaonic work. There are two traditions, whether it was written by Rabbi Shimon Kayara or Rabbi Yudai Gaon. They debated that, different cultures. But he quotes that work as saying that since locusts are written in the Torah right next to fish, just like fish don't require shlita, the locusts don't require shlita. You could kill the locust however you want. You could eat it however you want. And then it's kosher. You don't need to shuck it. I don't know why you would think you need to shuck it. How would you even shuck it? The trachea and the esophagus, I don't even know if they have that. Okay. So it says by fish, as long as it has fins and scales. Let's say it doesn't have the fins and scales now, but it will grow them afterwards. Kigona sultanis vapian, like the sultanis fish. Rashi says this is a small fish. And there are sardines which do grow their scales after the fact. So let's say the sultanis or the apian, them mutar. Those are allowed, even though they only grow them later on. Let's say they have scales, but when they come out of the water, they shed their scales, like the akunas fish, and the apunas, and the kaspatias, and the atunas, which is maybe the tuna fish. So then we're going to say Arezem Mutar. That's kosher. Yeah. What are you going to say, Bill?
Yeah,
I think it means to say that they're kosher because they're going to grow later. So it's a kosher fish. Our question that does derive about this is, are these signs a siman or a siba? Is it a sign that it's kosher? And this goes to your point that if it's going to grow later, we just need the sign so we know it's going to grow it, or is it a reason that it's kosher? And one of the reasons why this is relevant is, let's say today you can genetically modify these fish so that they don't grow either fins or scales. Would it still be kosher? Like you want the fish to not have scales. It makes it easier to eat. So let's say you could genetically modify that these versions of the fish, like the tuna or the sardines, that they don't have scales. Would it be kosher? That's the question. Okay, you had a question, Al? Tanan awesome. Well, why not? If they have the signs, they'd be kosher. They're now even talking about, and as it being kosher, where you just produce the meat in the lab. So that's completely genetically modified. So Tanan awesome. I assume that all of our animals today are being genetically modified. Like here, they're genetically modifying the animals to breed the best meat, the best, the most delicious meat, etc.
So specifically say we don't do that.
Okay, so maybe some milk, but I assume that the baseline is everything is, unless it says it isn't. So, I mean, maybe if you go to Nate and Khana's farm, they probably don't do it, or then maybe even they do it also. I don't know. Tanan awesome. Kol sheyeshlo kaskeses. Anything that has scales, yeshlos, not only just the animals, also the fruit and vegetables is. That's why people want like heritage chickens and heritage tomatoes. Those are the ones that are not. But the baseline assumption is that any mass-produced food is going to be genetically engineered. So Tanan also we learned kol sheyeshlo kaskeses. Anything that has scales, yeshlos not pure. As fins. There's something that have fins, ve'enlo katskeses. There are some things that have fins, but they don't have scales. Yeshlo katskeses, ve'yeshlos napir. If it has scales and fins, dag tar, it's a kosher fish. Yeshlos napir, ve'enlo katskeses, but if it's fins but not scales, dag tamei, it's not kosher. Mar says, Michtia katskeses kasamchin, and since we're relying upon scales, Lichtov Rachmana Katskeses, well, Lichtov Snapir, let it write about the take care, God willing, see you in the morning. since the Torah has, since we're relying on scales, let the Torah write about the scales. We'll not here and not write about the about the fins. So the Gemara says, no, ikas rachmana kaskeses. If the Torah wrote about the scales, well, kosef snapir, but it didn't write about the fins. Havamina, I would have said my kaskeses. What's the scales? Snapir. I would have thought that the kaskeses is a fin. Mafilu dag tame. Even if it's and even a non-kosher fish will be kosher because it has the fins. So therefore, kosef rachmanas napir v'kaskeses. So the Gemara says, well, hasha the kosef rachmanas napir v'kaskeses. Since the Torah talks about fins and scales, in my the kaskeses levusha. How do we know the kaskeses refers to scales? How do we know that's what it means? The Gemara says, I'll tell you how we know, because it says, well, because the ksiv, because it says v'shiryon kasim hu avush, because it says about Goliath that he was wearing the scales. The Gemara says v'lichtov rachmana kasketzes v'lichtov snapir. What the Torah could write about scales and doesn't have to mention fins, and we would know. So Amar Rabbi Avo v'chein Tana. The Rabbi Shmuel Yagdil Torah v'yadir. The Torah writes about fins, even though it doesn't need to, in order to make the Torah even more greater and glorifying it. And Rashi says, what does this mean? Rashi says that this tells us. Rashi tells us. It's not the Rashi. Hold on one second. Tosas tells us, Harbe Amar Lanu Taimim Leidam Ma Hukas Kesef. The Torah gives us different ways of understanding what the scales are. So this is just an additional approach. That the Yagdil Torah V'Yadir means the Torah gives us many ways of knowing what the halacha is. Tana Rabbanon. So the Gemara cites a brisa, a pretty long brisa that'll take us into tomorrow's daf. The Torah says that this you can eat, mikol asher b'mayim. This you could eat. Oh no. Tana Rabbanan mimasra shenemar achol sheyeshlo. This is an introductory brisa. But the fact that the Torah says you could eat anything that has fins and scales. Shomeani al tochal she'inlo. I know that you can't eat that which it doesn't have. From the fact that the Torah says don't eat what it doesn't have. I know that you can eat that which it does have. Why did the Torah say both? Eat that has fins and scales and don't eat what doesn't have. It says whatever has fins and scales you can eat, whatever does not have you can't eat. So why does it repeat it? To say you're in violation if you violate it with a positive commandment and a negative commandment. It says in the brisa, you can eat the fins and scales with whatever is in the water. Why does it have to say what this you shall eat, which is extra? Yachol, I might have thought whole here, since the Torah says that you're allowed to eat we know that we've already seen that if there's a sheretz, like something that grew that never went on the ground, it's permitted to eat. So from the fact that it says a sheretz in the water, I might have think Yachol v'hitir bimfurash v'chein b'stam. I might have thought that since a sheretz, like a creepy crawly creature in the water, it's kosher explicitly, and also stam. I might have said ma kishehitir b'furash lo hitir ela b'kim. Just like when it's explicitly permitted, it's only in the utensil. Av kishehitir b'stam, also when it's also allowed, stam lo hitir ela b'kim. It's only allowed in the utensil, but if it was raised in the pits and the wells, then I would have thought that it's prohibited. Minayim arabos boros shichem umoros. How do I know that if it was raised in the wells, the pits, and the caves, that a person will take water from them and he won't be afraid to drink, even though there's these creatures in there? Tam Lomar, You can eat anything that's in the water. That means to say these creepy creatures that are raised in these waters, you can eat. So the Gemara says, where do we know that these creepy creatures that are raised in utensils are permitted? Where they are allowed in utensils? This you can eat from everything that is in the water. And it says also in the seas and the streams. So we say in the streams and the water, those you can eat when they have the signs of being kosher. But if they don't have it, you can't eat it. So the utensils, even though they don't have fins and scales, you can eat those creepy creatures. The Gemara says, maybe I can read it the opposite. Maybe in the utensil, even though it has these signs, you can't eat it. Gemara says, don't say that. So it says, whatever does not have fins and scales in the streams and the waters, from every sheretz of the water. In the streams and the waters, if it doesn't have it, but in the utensils, even though it doesn't have the utensils, you could eat it. Even though it doesn't have the fins and scales, you could eat it. The aim of the Gemara says, I might have thought by mayim klal that in the water is a general rule, by yamim menachalim is prat, and the seas and the streams is a specific. Klal prat, when you have a general balance specific, aim lanu, aim beklal al masha prat. You only have in the general what's in the specific. Yamim menachalim in that whatever's in the sea and the streams is included. Then it needs fins and scales. Me'itzin v'charitzin lo, but in the ditches and the pits, it doesn't need it. So therefore, mayim chazav klal. So therefore, we have this general followed by specific, followed general, and we learn from here that also anything that grows in that's in the streams and the seas requires fins and scales, even these reptile-like creatures. The Gemara says, "Hani trei klali this michi la'adadin." But these two, if you look at the pasuk, those are right next to each other. It's not a general followed by specific followed general. It's two generals right next to each other. Amravina kedami b'marava. So the Gemara says, no, this is. If you look at the pasuk, it says kol asher enlos napir v'kaskesses b'mayim. Anything that doesn't have fins and scales in the water, uvenachuim. Mikol sheret hamayim. So those are umikol nefesh hachaya asher b'mayim. So those are two general statements in the verse. Any water and any water. So therefore, the Gemara says, the first general is in pasuk tes. It says tachum mikol asher b'mayim, and then it says kol asher los napir v'kaskesses b'mayim, and then in the following pasuk it says kol asher ein los napir v'kaskesses b'yamim u'v'nachuim, which is the specific. So Amaravina kedami b'marava kol makom sha'ata motze shnei kolos hasmuchun zelazeh hatel proper name. Whenever you have two generalities followed by a specific, then you put the specific in between them. The dunam, the call protocol, we can apply call protocol. But mayim is a general, but yam and nachom is a prat. But mayim chazer call protocol. So you have general followed by specific, followed by general. Yet adan el ke'ena prat. We follow the specific. Ma prat befurash. Mayim novim. Av kol mayim novim. So we see from here, just like the general, just like the specific explains explicitly. Even if it's flowing water, the shkatzim that were raised there are permitted. Also, anything that is comes in flowing water, they're going to be prohibited as well. All right, we'll stop here. We'll pick this up. Prohibited. Unless it has the fins and scales. Baruch Hashem, we'll stop here. Okay.